Conscious. My name is Amy Ballantyne. Welcome to Power to the People Pleasers. I'm so excited to have my guest, Ginny Hoyt, here, Somatic Life Coach. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me on here this morning. I am so ready to dive into this conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, you are a person who is helping people to take this component of the nervous system and how that relates to the subconscious rewiring of our survival patterns and beliefs. Like, let's dig into this because people pleasing is part of the challenge. But I'd love to know first, Jenny, were you ever a people pleaser? Have you ever been? And how did that show up in your life?
Oh my gosh. People pleasing for me was something that has been evident from the beginning of my life. I mean, it was just painfully obvious, even from being a young child, that was something I struggled with. And it showed up for me as extreme shyness from my earliest days of elementary school, that I had this fear of, like, if I did something, said something wrong, then I was going to, be punished for it in some way. So my best approach to that was, like, if I don't do or say anything, I'm giving them no reason to find any fault in me. So I'm just going to stay quiet and make myself really small to get by. As I developed into an adult, grew up a little bit, I would say the peak of my people pleasing really culminated in like 2017, 2018, where I just felt so hollow in the relationships that I was experiencing because the people pleasing was driving my behavior. Where I was participating in conversations where I just was going with what everybody else was saying, regardless of how I actually felt, because there was just so much fear of saying something that might go against the grain. And that just corroded so much confidence for me and left a lot of my relationships feeling so hollow, because I was realizing, like, I have all these friends, but none of them really know who I am because I haven't given them the opportunity to get to know me, because all I'm doing is showing them this people pleasing tendency of, let me just do or say whatever I think they want to see to make myself feel okay in those situations.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. I feel like you're not alone in that. Many people would get caught in I'll just stay quiet and let people have their own opinion and not share yours as well. So then what was the catalyst for you shifting in 2017? You shifted away from this, not the catalyst. What changed? So now you are a person who, what does it look like to be your friend now?
So I would say that my turning point was just hitting this, like, rock bottom moment of, like, this is not how life is supposed to be. Like, life is not supposed to feel this hard, this empty, this constrained. Like, I just felt so constricted in this little prison I had built for myself as a means of trying to help myself feel safe. And I just reached a point where I knew I had to do something differently. Which is when I started exploring, different avenues of learning how to better understand, like, why do I do these things? Because I knew I didn't like it, but I felt so powerless to do anything about it. Which is how I stumbled into finding somatic work, which just so clicked for me of, like, I really understand this vocabulary. This is really landing with me in the way that I can relate to myself, and helped pave a path of, like, making sense of why I was being driven to do things I knew I didn't want to do, and help feel more comfortable to relate to myself in a more authentic way and share that with other people. So today, I mean, I can't even believe the leaps and bounds of just how different life gets to look now on the other side of being through a journey like that, where the amount of relaxation I can feel in my body is just tenfold what it used to be. That I'm going through life now just feeling so much more at ease with myself, that I know I can show up and say things that I want to say and do what I want to do and go against the grain, sometimes in a really big way, in a way that I know other people are not going to understand. And I can feel so comfortable with myself of, that's fine. That's fine if they don't understand. I don't have a reaction to it anymore. And I can feel so at peace with, as long as I'm good with what I'm doing and I understand why I want to do the things that I do, then that's all that really matters to me now.
I love that. I love that. So let's dig in The role of the subconscious in people pleasing. Tell me more.
Absolutely. For me, I think this is the missing piece that a lot of people are looking for in changing their relationship with people pleasing tendencies or just self sabotaging practices at large. Something I think is really great about social media and kind of the conversation about mental health in these last few years is that it has become so much easier to find the information to help cognitively understand why we are driven to do the things that we do. There are so many accounts online that share beautiful information of, explaining why behaviors might be connected to things in the past, that sort of thing, which I think is a beautiful thing, which leads to a lot of self aware people who can see, like, okay, I know why I do these things. But to me, there is this missing component of, like, okay, I have all this information, but when I'm in the moment and I'm being confronted with something that feels really triggering for me, it's so hard to take the steps, the action steps necessary to start making changes. Instead, what I hear a lot of is people who can say, I know why I'm doing this, but I still feel stuck. I don't know what to do next. And that is when somatics come in, the subconscious comes in, learning to regulate the nervous system is that component. Because when we dip into people pleasing tendencies, it is a response from a dysregulated nervous system or a triggered nervous system. That there is a stimulus, there is something that's going on that is making your body feel unsafe, that makes it feel like it needs to compensate in that way. And when you can learn how to get in dialogue with the body, get in dialogue with the subconscious, pull up all the stuff that's been swept under the rug for so long and take a good hard look at that, that is how the body learns I might not have been safe in the past, but right now I'm actually okay. And actually, there's nothing dangerous about the situation. There's nothing going wrong. I don't need to be on edge right now. And it's okay for me to relax, unwind, and do what it is that I would naturally want to do. So I think for a lot of people, that's kind of the piece that they're looking for. They have the cognitive understanding of maybe why they're doing these things, but it's the emotional resonance with that information that's kind of keeping them from making the action steps to changing behavior for the long term.
Wow, thank you. So I'd love if you could share. There are a couple of things in there. I'd love to back up a little bit for those people who are watching or listening this. What is somatic? I'm aware, but explain that in a way that someone who doesn't know what you're talking about would understand, please.
Absolutely. Yeah. Somatics is not a super mainstream topic, so it is something that's pretty new for most people to learn about. But if I had to dial it down to a simple sentence, it is just getting your body in, allowing your body to be part of the conversation in your
Mm,
healing journey.
mm,
That, the trauma, the stories we carry is stored in the tissues of our body. It presents itself in the way that our nervous system reacts to the world around us.
mm,
And somatics is all about diving in and seeing, like, what have I been holding on to? What is it that I needed back then that I didn't get to have that is causing these wounds to show up over and over again?
mm.
And how do I get to meet those needs today and heal those parts of myself?
Awesome, thank you. And a moment ago, you said be in discussion or dialogue with your subconscious. How would a individual do that?
Absolutely. This is a really beautiful process to learn how to do. It is basically finding a way to relate to yourself on the deepest level of being able to articulate the different parts of self that are present within you, that we have, all these sub personalities. People pleasing can certainly be one of them. It definitely was for me. Of almost these little parts of ourselves that come online throughout the day or throughout our life when, certain stimulus arises in our experience. And
Mm,
when you get in dialogue with your subconscious, it's learning how to be a witness to those parts instead of just diving right into them and being super attached to the stories that they're showing you, but learning to be objective to it and watching, like, okay, I can see that, I recognize these behaviors, I recognize these thoughts. I can see my people pleasing tendency is starting to show up right now, and getting in dialogue with, okay, so it's here for a reason. What is going on? presently with me right now that is triggering this response for me? What is this reminding me of? How is this familiar to me? What is it about this dynamic that's causing this? Um, and getting into conversation about like, okay, that initial getting clarity on what that initial wounding was. What was it that I needed back then that I didn't get to have? And relating to that part presently, giving it what it was looking for so that it can unattach, release, relax, and let us, keep moving with our day.
So a couple of times now you said, "What was I looking for back then?" What are some examples of things that we didn't necessarily get so this can be even clearer?
Yeah, absolutely. Emotional unmet needs are the driving force that cause a lot of these coping strategies to develop in the first place. So some examples of that. One of the most common ones is safety, that a lot of people miss out on. And when I very first learned about this, it was really easy for me to brush that off of like, I grew up in a safe house, like nothing. It was not an unsafe place to be. But safety can look many different ways. It can express in many different ways. So, did I always feel safe to say the things I wanted to say? Actually, no, I didn't really feel safe to always express myself. I always felt physically safe, but emotionally, was I always safe? Did I always feel safe to ask questions? Was I shamed for, saying the wrong thing? That caused me to close up and to be like, okay, that's not okay for me to do or say these things. I need to be mindful of that in the future. Another one could be love, acceptance, feeling like you can trust others. Is it safe for me to lean on other people when I need help? Or have I learned through past experience that that's not okay and I can only count on myself? I need to do everything alone. It's those emotional unmet needs that drive a lot of our present day behavior if we're like searching to fill them in ways that until we learn how to meet it ourselves, we're never going to be able to meet that by externalizing that into the outer world. You're never going to be able to fill those needs from other people or through these coping strategies. But the reason these coping strategies develop is because a lot of these unmet needs, these initial wounds, were caused when we were so young that we didn't have the control or the
Yeah.
understanding to learn how to be there for ourselves. So we just did the best we could. And that's a really important pillar for me in the work that I do is helping shift the relationship people can have with these parts of self because it's really easy to meet them with shame, meet them with judgment, meet them with resentment of like, I just hate this about myself that I always do it. That was certainly the way I approached it for most of my life. Um, but recognizing like these are parts of self that helped you get through, really challenging times in your life where you didn't have any other options. That these parts you actually owe a lot to. Like they were really there for you when, nothing else was. And shifting that relationship to like, I'm really grateful that I had this to lean on at the time when I needed it, but I'm okay now and I don't need this
Mm.
now and I'm ready to let this go.
Okay, so I'm going to take the practice now. I'm really grateful that I have been a people pleaser, but I'm
Mm.
ready to let that go. Right?
That's what it's all about. Yes, it's like I can
Mm.
have gratitude for these parts that I don't have to be resentful to them, that I can have so much appreciation because they absolutely served a purpose. They were developed for a reason.
Mm.
But as adults, we can let them go. We don't need them anymore.
Yes, huge. Okay. So thank you. Thank you for all this clarity. Now, in our original conversation, I have some notes here that I was like, "Oh, I got to bring this back up." You mentioned adopting a parent-child relationship with self. Can
Mhm.
you share a little bit about that? When is that related to people please? How does that relate?
Absolutely. So earlier when I talked about, I think like one of the first most important steps for learning how to relate to yourself in this new healthy way is learning how to be a witness to the parts as they come up instead of immediately identifying with the stories that they want to tell you. And for me, that adopting like a parent child relationship in that way of like I as my present day self am the parent. When you think about what a parent represents to a child, it is a steady calm, controlled figure of safety, that I am unmovable, I am unshakable, and I can handle whatever it is that you need to bring to me that you're struggling with, that you get to count on me, that I'll be there. So I get to be that person today for these little parts of self that are struggling with my initial childhood wounds, that as they come up, I can be a witness to them and watch. Okay, like I see what's going on. I see that, we're struggling with something right now. Bring it to me. I want to know what's going on. Let's dive into it. And letting these parts of self feel comfortable enough to open up and explore, okay, what is the root of this? Like I want to know where this initially started. What was this initial wounding? As much clarity as possible to know what it is this part is looking for it to feel safe enough to release. Um, and I think that relationship can provide a lot of clarity in the roles that we play with ourselves as we learn to regulate our nervous systems and heal these parts, that I get to be the one who's in control, and I get to be the one who, decides what we're going to do, that I'm not going to be run by these stories and these narratives that have been controlling me for most of my life, perhaps even up until this point, that I get to choose differently. And I have that capacity and freedom to do that now, being the adult and not being in control by these initial wounds.
Wow. I love that. Um, thank you. Thank you. The last question that I have is this idea that compassion is the gateway. You shared that with me. Can you share, some thoughts around that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Compassion for me is just opens up so much more resource for us to dive into the deep layers of what we have going on. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it's really easy for a lot of people to fall into this trap of resentment and meeting these parts of self with frustration, with anger, of like, I just want to be done with this. Which you're just kind of like coming head to head with these, parts of self, of like you're pushing against them, which doesn't leave room for growing to happen. But when you can meet them with compassion and you're dropping those walls, that you can get into the dialogue and figure out, what is it that I'm meant to learn from these parts. Like I mentioned earlier, like they're there for a reason. They developed for a reason. It's not just because you're a broken person that you ended up this way, but there is a logical source of why we're driven to do the things that we do. When you can relax and let these parts, get in conversation with you of trying to figure out, like, why is this happening to me? Um, that's when the magic gets to happen. That's where we experience the most growth. And for people who might be feeling right now of like, okay, well, I know I'm definitely in the place of meeting it with frustration and resentment. I think it's a great turning point, like what I mentioned earlier, is that understanding of like, these parts of self got you through a time in your life where you had no control, and they were here to help you. They were here to protect you. I refer to them as protectors for that reason, of reinforcing this idea of they served a really important role. I think it can be easy to underestimate just how out of control the world felt as a child. Like you didn't get to make any decisions on your own behalf when you were young enough. You didn't even get to, decide what clothes you wore to school. For some of us, like even in the smallest ways, we didn't have that autonomy, and that plays a big role in the way that we make sense of the world, where we just can feel like, what can I do to protect myself, because I don't have any options right now. And so it is the development of these protectors, the people pleasing, the perfectionism, all of that comes up in that way of like, okay, I can't control anything externally, but I can do my best to manage my own behavior and emotions to get through something that I don't understand, or might be dangerous, or might feel scary. um, that can really shift people's relationship with it, from resentment to, okay, I understand why I ended up this way and why this happened to me. And there's, for a lot of people, this big turning point of just like so much like a mourning process almost, just this release of so much pent up emotion of like, oh my gosh, like I went through so much more than I may have realized that I was trying so hard to keep myself safe. And we didn't even really, certainly as
Mm.
kids, didn't understand that that's what we were doing.
Mhm.
Um, but like a mourning for that early younger version of ourself that just was feeling so scared and so helpless, that we were driven to learn how to do these things that can just shift so much of like, okay, now it feels effortless to give compassion to these parts of myself as they come up because I can more clearly see the role that they're playing and what they are trying to do and all the ways that they have served me in the past. That I think, it just does a lot in shifting that relationship. And once we get to that point of the compassion, like I said, then it just really opens up the opportunity for us to dive deep in, address what we need to address, and become the people who are the most aligned and authentic versions of ourselves that we were meant to show up in the world as. And
Mhm.
there is, no greater feeling than having that type of autonomy and control over yourself. That like, I know who I am. I'm really proud of the way that I present myself to the world, and, when these situations come up where I am feeling triggered and still can slide back, that, I'm not jumping back into, oh, I'm broken and this didn't work, and um, being really hard on myself. But like, okay, then that just means I have a little bit more work to do here. And, that journey will never end. But to me, the clearer that you can identify and relate to yourself what's going on, I mean, it's just vastly easier. And it's a really, beautiful and worthwhile journey to walk down.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as we wrap up today, is there a final parting thought that you would leave people pleasers with when it comes to, the somatic side of things, or perhaps the connection with people pleasing? Your final thoughts here.
Mm. I know for me, when I was in the thick of my people pleasing, that I had this story of like hopelessness, powerlessness, of like, I know I don't like this, and I just feel helpless in doing anything about it. So my final remarks would just be like that is not true. That there is
Mm.
a reason why your body is presenting this way, and it is a logical reason. It is there for a purpose, and consider it an invitation from your body to explore more. That your body is asking you to take a deeper look at this and explore why we're struggling with the things that we're struggling with. Um, and yeah, just dive into that with an open mind that you are more than capable of working through this, moving past this, and becoming the person that you want to be on the other side of it. That, there is nobody who is hopeless and beyond help, that every single person can work through this type of process.
Amazing, Jenny. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, for those who want to continue learning and hearing from Ginny, you can connect with her at her website, ginnyhoyt.com, or on Instagram at Ginny Hoyt with two underscores. Make sure you get those two underscores to find her there. So, Ginny, I want to thank you so much for being an incredible guest here today. It was such a lovely conversation. And for those people who have listened or tuned in to Power to the People Pleasers, thank you so much for listening in again, and stay tuned for the next episode. It's coming soon. Bye now.